Chris Strouser has officially been announced as the Houston Texans' next offensive line coach, and Derek Stingley out there trying to get players to come to Houston, scouting a little bit, recruiting. Does Patrick Queen in Houston make sense?
And to tie it all in, we want to develop a great team here that we can deliver wins to the city of Houston. We want to deliver a championship here to the city of Houston, and that's what it'll be about.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Friday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I'm John Hickman. Of course, I'm joined by none other than Cody Davis. Had an opportunity to stop by Minute Maid Park on Thursday night to go catch out the Cactus Jack Travis Scout Foundation, where they had a celebrity softball game, and the proceeds of that celebrity softball game goes to the foundation. I forgot the name of the foundation, but for HBCUs. It's pretty dope, man. It's pretty dope when you're able to get old enough to watch your favorite athletes get old enough. And T-Mac is one of Cody and I's favorite basketball players of all time. Me and Cody have a lot of similarities before we got talking to the Texans, right? And then you see T-Mac, and he hits, I think, a home run.
No, he hit a double. It was a double.
He hits a double. T-Mac could have ran for the home run, and I watched him. This is how I know T-Mac is just in the motion. I thought T-Mac was going to need a life alert by the way he ran last night at that softball game. But it's pretty cool. Fans came out. I was out there with the school district, and so to see those athletes put on a show for an HBCU foundation was pretty dope. Happy Black History Month. I am Black History. Let's talk about the Houston Texans. Chris Strouser has officially been announced as the next offensive line coach for Houston. And as much as I like George Warhop, I thought George Warhop is a casualty simply because he was a part of a coaching staff that just wasn't good. I thought that George Warhop was a better position coach than considerably a lot of the position coaches last year. I'll look at George Warhop, Danny Barrett, Dino Vasso, and Joe Dana. And Vasso is still on the coaching staff right now. Joe Dana is in Buffalo, and Danny Barrett is still here. I thought George Warhop did a fairly good job of helping out Titus Howard. Just had a rookie offensive guard in Kenyon Green. Had a lot of issues with the center position. 3 centers played for Houston last year. And he also had 2 guards interchange out throughout the season as well. Just a lot of inconsistencies due to health and, Justin Britt stepping away. And he was a guy that I thought Houston may have looked at bringing back. However, Chris Strouser is coming from Indianapolis, spent about 3 to 4 seasons there. And immediately you got to look at, and I hate it's going to happen, and I don't think it's fair to the young man, but can Kenyon Green come close to what Quentin Nelson is for the Indianapolis coach, especially when he's healthy? And I think that's the biggest grab when you look at Chris Strouser right now. Can he get Kenyon Green to somewhat of a stratosphere level of what Quentin Nelson is as a left guard? And when you look at that, now you think to yourself, well, okay, that is a smart decision. I think your tackles are locked in, right? And if you can get one guard right coming in for a full offseason, then I presume he'll get another guard right at the right guard position and center position. Get these guys coached up at in the interior spot for the O-line simply because that was the weakness. I mean, we go back and replay the Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen just abusing the interior offensive line for Houston this past season. So Chris Strouser is in, George Warhop is out, and I think that this was a good decision, although I thought George Warhop should have gotten another year.
Yeah, you already know how I feel about George Woolhop. I think we talked about this a couple days ago on the show. I would have preferred for the Texans to keep him around. You know my motto, John. As a coach, I want to see if you can do more with less. And given all of the inconsistencies that went on with the offensive line last year, especially more so in the interior, because you already knew what you was working with your tackles on both sides. I would like to say that George Warhop did a pretty decent, a pretty fair, and in some instances, a good job in terms of how prepared and the solid performance that offensive line gave, especially in those interiors. But you say something that I want to like kind of look at a little bit more, and that's Keon Green. Uh, you already know I am one that is going to give Keon Green a pass for his performance last year because he was a rookie. Not only was he a rookie that missed majority of training camp. He's a rookie that went through several nagging injuries throughout his rookie season, and he's a rookie that probably went through what the hardest learning curve of like majority of all rookie offensive linemen. When you take a look at that gauntlet of defensive lines that he had to battle, especially midway through the season. But what I would say is if Keon Green stays healthy, and for me, health is the biggest factor into all this. If Keon Green stays healthy, we're gonna have to start putting some type of expectations on him. I know you said it's unfair, but at the end of the day, you're still looking at a guy who was a first round pick, a pretty high first round pick, if you ask me. And at some point, he needs to start living up to that expectation. Now, will Chris come in and help him get to that level? I really don't know as of right now, but what I will say is this: if Chris comes in and get Keon Green close to the expectations that a lot of people have for him, including myself, because I do believe his potential is to be one of the best offensive linemen in the league. And of course, I'm talking like 5-6 years down the line when you start looking at Keon Green as a veteran. But in terms for him to start coming close to reaching that potential, he's going to have to learn how to get accustomed to the NFL. Like you say, you need to get away from that little boy strength and pick up some grown man strength. And he's going to have to really get his skill set to the next level. I have a lot of confidence. I have a lot of faith in Keon Green. I do believe that young man is going to be okay. I had an opportunity to talk to him a couple weeks ago when he took the first shot for the Houston Rockets. He said that he's already in off-season mode. He's been getting his body and everything together. So that's a good thing. But as long as he stays healthy, starting next season, I want to see the talent that made Nick Caserio make him a first-round pick.
And I'll say this before we move on. Houston did have one of the healthier teams last year.
Mm-hmm.
The Colts did not. When you look at the rotating offensive line, we talked about it a couple of days ago. Through the first, I think 9 or 10 games of the season, they had already allowed 33 sacks. Once they were able to get a stable unit, then that sack number decreased from 33 to 27. The end of the year was 60, but again, more than half of that was at the beginning of the year. So for Chris Strauser to come in, I think the reason why it was easy for Indy to move on from him was because, this past season wasn't good, but we also wasn't healthy enough to get a stable unit out on that field. I believe that'll be different for Houston. And I believe that at the very least, you will have Titus Howard, Larry Tunsil, and now Kenyon Green in off-season mode already learning and growing. That will help with the stabilization of this offensive line. Moving forward, now Houston has to figure out what they want to do at the center position and what they want to do at the right guard position. Does it make sense to go vet rookie or vet or however you want to do it? But it is important for Houston to make sure that they prioritize it, whether that's in free agency or the draft, in order to give Chris Strauser everything he needs in this first year to make this offensive line go. Because if they are healthy, now we look at how are they developing. If they're on the field, we want to see them get better, of course. And I think that is why Houston brought him in. They saw how he was able to work with a healthy offensive line in Indy, that the year prior to last year had the league leading running back, didn't give up a lot of sacks. Like, that offensive line was crazy good last year. This past year, the year before last, they were crazy good. This past year, they just had a lot of injuries and rotating and didn't know how to, combat that.
And I want to mention this before moving on. I don't want to talk about this too much because we just did a couple weeks ago. But this is why it's important for Nick Caserio and the Texans to make sure that they take care of Larry Tunsil and Titus Howard this offseason. I don't want to get to the point where we start talking about or one of those guys, especially Titus Howard more so, or one of these guys are going to, be at training camp and all this other stuff, do the contract stuff. No, make sure you take care of your two guys because once again, if you go out there and you draft Bryce or CJ, you want to put them in the best situation, putting them in a better situation or the best situation that you can as a rookie quarterback means you have a solid offensive line, which means you have some damn good tackles already established.
The NFL season is over and the midway point of the NBA is here. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Listen, new customers right now get the no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Download the FanDuel app right now. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can bet on everything from the money lines to point spreads to three-point drain. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. Don't miss out on the chance on your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on to learn more.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Friday installment of Locked On Texans. And there's a lot of drama surrounding the Baltimore Ravens as of right now. Everyone knows the biggest storyline, whether or not they're going to pay Lamar Jackson. Will Lamar Jackson get traded? We talked about it a lot here on this show, the possibility or the fun possibility of having Lamar Jackson here in the city of Houston, regardless of what's going on. That is the biggest story surrounding the Ravens as of right now. However, there is another storyline I think is really important and possibly more realistic for not only fans and Raven fans and, potential suitors like the Houston Texans to keep their eyes set on. And that's the situation regarding Patrick Queen at this very moment. As of right now, the Baltimore Ravens have until, I believe, May 1st to decide whether or not they're going to pick up his fifth-year option on his contract. And look, we in 2023, so we got to start paying attention to what players say and post and take away from social media. I mean, we just did it not too long ago with not only the Houston Texans, but the Houston Rockets as well. Players start showing signs that they're potentially unhappy or they might want out when they start deleting everything off of social media regarding to their current team. Patrick has already done it. And however, his former teammate, who put together one of, if not the best, or helped the best defensive team of all time at LSU in 2019. You already know that championship team. Derek Stingley reached out to Patrick on Twitter. Hey, we got something special down here in Houston for you. And what did Patrick respond with? Some eye emojis. Now, John, with all that being said, would you or would you not like to see Nick Caserio dive into his draft capital and create a trade package in order to get Patrick Queen to the city of Houston? And by the way, this is one of the, rising linebackers in the league. Keep that in mind.
This is going to sound so cliche, but if DeMeco Ryans really thinks he's a good piece, if DeMeco says, yeah, I think he's a player that can come in right now and he's already a good player, won defensive rookie of the year. Last year, 5 sacks, only had 9 missed tackles, and he brought a lot of those bad numbers down. He picked a lot of those good numbers.
How many missed tackles?
9.
Okay, I just wanted you to repeat that because last couple of years, tackling has been an issue here in the city of Houston.
And he brought a lot of those bad numbers down, like his rookie year, 21 missed tackles. Last season in 2021, 14. This past season, 9. Total tackles 108, 98, 117. Sacks 3, 2, and 5. When I look at it, going on the blitz, that was the second highest he had last year, was 64. When I look at what he was able to do in pass coverage, only allowed 7 yards per target. 9 yards per completion, 464 yards, but he didn't allow a touchdown. His rookie year, 3 touchdowns allowed. Sophomore year, 2 touchdowns allowed. Junior year, now he's a vet, no touchdowns allowed. So he is and 2 interceptions this past year. He's this guy who has improved. And if D'Amico Ryan comes in and say, you know what, we got to address our linebacker position, but what if we can address it by using a one of our picks, maybe in the 3rd round, maybe in our 4th round, that we could trade, or we were ideally probably going to project to get one of those linebackers in the draft. I don't know where they rank the linebackers right now, but what if we can use that pick to go ahead and bring in a player that we see fit being good right now for our system? Now, when I look at the Baltimore Ravens and the defense that they ran last year compared to the San Francisco 49ers, I'm not 100% sure how Patrick Queen would fit. And then I look at how Patrick Queen would fit next to Christian Harris. I do think that they do a lot of the same things, and they are in many ways very similar as a player. But again, if D'Amico says I can make it work, and I feel like he's a player that, of course, we got to get a deal done with him at some point soon, and that may hinder, because we got to get a deal done with Tytus Howard. We got to get a deal done with Larry Tunsil. Now we got to get a deal done with Patrick Queen. At some point, we got to use some money in some of our cap space to sign players. I don't know how much of that money they would like to take on right now, but the good thing about it is, outside of Larry Tunsil's, prediction of what he wants for his money, you wouldn't have to worry about a major quarterback contract. So maybe it'll be worth it.
Yeah, it is.
But it all really does come down to whether or not D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio is on the same page. Let's go back to what Nick Caserio said early in the press conference this year after Lovie Smith was fired, before they even hired D'Amico Ryans. It's a we thing. And I think that this is the perfect case. Do you think he can help your defense out? Yeah, I do. Do you think he's worth it and we can afford it for the future as we try to build a roster? I think we can make some things work after they move around some contracts and get off of some of those guys. So I don't have a dog in this fight. My dog in this fight is whether or not those two parties can get on the same page and make it work. I think Patrick Queen is a hell of a young linebacker. I would love to see what D'Amico could probably do with Queen and Harris together on that field. And again, he's improved in damn near every good category that you want him to improve in. So he's a player that I think would make sense. But where do D'Amico and Nick Caserio stand on that in terms of playing on the field and money? Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise, then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com. Look it up on the App Store or check it out online. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise whenever they use promo code Locked On. Make sure you use that code in all caps in the game. Again, that's Locked On, all caps in the game at ultimate-gm.com, or you can find it on the App Stores. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Welcome back to the show. We will dive into the YouTube comments. I know twice for 1 week.
We got a lot, man. That's why.
It's a lot. It's a lot. We're going to get to a little bit today, a few today. Russell Richardson said the Texans better find a pass rush. This was on the podcast where we discussed the confirmation that the Texans will draft their quarterback at number 2 overall. Pass rush, Cody?
I'm not opposed to it, but it's only because this team needs a potential, really good franchise quarterback. And you have an opportunity to pick not one, but 2 of these guys. You have 2 choices. And that's why at number 2, or if they trade up to number 1, which I highly doubt they will, your first pick gotta be Bryce or CJ. No ifs, and buts about it. There's still talent on this defensive front. And look, I understand this draft has a lot of potential on the defensive side of the ball, but I don't think it's worth passing up a quarterback that could potentially be your next franchise quarterback if everything goes right, of course, with his development and health and everything else that goes in between, whether or not these players live up to their expectations.
So on that same podcast, on that show, man, Alex Hernandez really got it popping in the comments, man. So my man Alex Hernandez, if you are watching this show, shout out to Alex Hernandez and shout out to everybody that thinks differently from the other person. Doesn't mean you're always right. Doesn't mean you are, some philosophical genius and just like but you do think different, and I respect that. So my man Alex Hernandez said the Texans need to stay away from Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I'd rather them draft Anderson at 2, Hyatt at 12, and Henner or Hooker at 33. Best player available from there on out. Now, this is where it gets fun. Cat 8 replies. Your mom's boyfriend said, "You sound crazy. You must be a Davis Mills fan." My man Jalen Johnson, 0339. Yeah, nah. Miles and that cognac. Dude, you're crazy. They don't need any more projects on their plate. My man Jeffrey Smith said, "Just nah, bro." Let's see. Sarah McCoy, one of my favorites. She said, "We need a good young quarterback more than we need an edge rusher at this point. Hyatt is not good enough. It's not a good enough receiver to merit using the number 12 overall pick on." And I disagree with that, Sarah. I believe Jalen Hyatt is better than Quentin Johnson from TCU. That's just my thought. I can't wait to talk about the wide receivers next week. And then she also continued with Henner and Hooker are project quarterbacks at best. Most likely will be an NFL quarterback or stars in the USFL or XFL. Alex, I know you are well-intentioned, but these picks of yours are just not very good. Also, Hooker will be 26 before the start of the 2023 season. A 26-year-old rookie? Yeah. Alex, shout out to you for thinking different. I rarely say things like this, but man, that is a god-awful idea.
I mean, I get where he's coming from, but I do want him to go back and let us know whether or not if he's a Davis Mills fan or if he still believes in Davis Mills. We talk a lot about players that the Houston Texans already have, especially these young players. Over the last 2 years, the potential that we see, the potential that we think they have, and they couldn't live up to their expectations due to the inabilities of the coaching staff. And I do wonder at times, how much of the struggles that we saw out of Davis Mills last year was more so him just not being very good, or was it more so the coaching staff? And I hate to say this, unfortunately, Pep Hamilton, not putting Davis Mills in a position to succeed.
Stop hating to say stuff.
Because I only say I hate to say it because it's hard to get a true evaluation of these coaches here in the city of Houston, i.e. the Rockets, when they don't have the talent or they don't have the appropriate team to really do something. That's why I say I hate to say it. That's why when we talk about the potentials of firing Lovie Smith and not bringing back Pep Hamilton and, of course, the god-awful foolishness that's going on with the Rockets right now, I find it hard to believe as an analyst, as a journalist, to get a full evaluation of the coaching staff when your general managers keep putting these coaches in a terrible position. And that's why I say I wonder if the struggles we seen out of Davis Mills was more so him just being not good, or was it because he didn't have the right coaches around him? But I'm not saying that just to say, they should stick with Davis Mills for another season. But if that is your guys' point of making that comment, then I would say I understand it. But at the end of the day, even the pinnacle what Davis Mills can be in the NFL, I don't think comes close to what CJ or Bryce could be in the NFL.
Man, my last one, my man Benny Yo on the podcast where we talked about the number one spot. Should Houston, what's podcast is this? Should Houston be concerned about the Colts trading up? My man Benny O asked us, how do y'all feel about Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State as a late pick or undrafted? Well, Benny O, I don't think Deuce Vaughn will go undrafted. I think Deuce Vaughn is one of those. He may may sneak into the later part of the second round, but I think he's a third or fourth round pick. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. So listen up. I love Deuce Vaughn. I love the idea of Deuce Vaughn in Houston. I'll tell you why. Deuce Vaughn to me is a good enough runner and athletic enough out of the backfield. I forgot who we was talking to, but they also made this point, and I didn't want to say it, but he kind of reminds me of Darren Sproles. And if he reminds me of Darren Sproles, then he kind of reminds me of Austin Eckler. I would love Deuce Vaughn in Houston. I've been looking at Deuce Vaughn in Houston for a very long time, that possibility for a very long time. And I think that if Houston can get him late, that'd be a great decision. Somebody else also made the argument that it's important to invest in the running backfield. You don't want to run Damian Pierce into the ground. I absolutely agree. I just don't think it should be Bijan Robinson with the 12th overall pick. And if you guys really know me, you know why I don't want Bijan Robinson to come here. But overall, Houston is not a running back away. And Bijan is one of those players that is for teams that could possibly be a running back away, or a team that's kind of put together right now and they're missing a few pieces. Houston really needs to invest into their wide receiver position more than they need to invest into their running back position. They have a running back for the future. They currently do not have a wide receiver for the future, regardless about how anybody feels about the return of John Mechie once he gets on the field, about the possibility of Nico Collins with a better quarterback play. They currently do not have a wide receiver for the future. They need that. And I think that can be addressed with the number 12 overall pick. Thank you guys for checking out today's show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. You see it. If you see it, you should follow. Then make sure you scroll over to YouTube as well. Type that Locked On Texan in. Subscribe, like, and as always, make sure y'all comment.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.